Oh, hey, I'm Sarah Vesloff.
And I'm Frederick Philip
Fred.
von Weiss. And thank you so much for consuming the Thunder Nerds, a conversation with the people behind the technology that love what they do and do tech good. Welcome to the show, everybody. We have a pretty good one today. We have actually two guests, and we'll get into that. But Sarah, why don't you start us off with our sponsor?
Yeah, first I want to go ahead and give a shout out to our sponsor, Auth0. Auth0 makes it easy for developers to build a custom, secure, and standards-based unified login, providing authentication and authorization as a service. So do us a favor, try them out now. Go by going to auth0.com.
Excellent. And we also want to tell you, if you can, go ahead and subscribe to the show, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, and join us in live chat with the show. I'm trying to actually get to the thing so I could live chat with you, so I could see what's going on. So that being said, without any further ado, let's go ahead and welcome our guest. We have senior front-end web developer and lobster roll connoisseur, Todd Libby. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. We've been talking a lot and super excited to have you on the show. And just to also mention, everybody, we have a guest host, which is Krista Marcin. Chris, are you there with us?
Yo, 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 what's good?
Nice.
Welcome to the show, Chris. Chris kind of joined us all of a sudden. Brian couldn't be with us today, so Chris is stepping in as a guest host with us.
Yep, just chilling and killing. Just kidding.
Chilling and killing. Love it. Love it. So, Todd, where are you actually joining us from?
I am in, I'm from Portland, Maine. Right now I'm in New Hampshire, actually, at my other place near where my parents live. I was visiting today, but I'll be back in Maine later on. But yeah, I'm a New Englander, Maine, New Hampshire.
You always been? Is that where you're gonna stay forever? Is that your main place?
As much as I love lobster rolls and lobster, no, I actually lived in California for a while, Southern California. I was in Anaheim and La Jolla for 5 years.
Oh, wow, nice.
And worked at a variety of places in my younger days of being a troubadour of trouble, as I like to call it. So, but yeah, most of my life has been spent in New England, Maine, and New Hampshire.
Yeah, you can hear it. I'm originally from Boston, as I told you before we started the show, but a lot of people don't hear it until I get really mad or really tired, and I'm like, get in the car, and it's just like it's all downhill from there, all downhill. And I can do a killer impression of both of my parents, which I'm not going to do here because that's not right. But I can hear the New England.
I'm from Jersey, but I lost my accent apparently a long, long time ago. I've been here for way too long in Florida.
Yeah. It fades away.
So you're visiting your family. How's the whole COVID situation going for you? Speaking about traveling around.
I'm trying to keep the travel down to a minimum, but traveling has been, as we all know, kind of cut back a lot. I had some conferences I had planned on going to that were canceled due to the right, I think everybody made the right call at those conferences. Everybody in my immediate family is doing fine. My sister and my mother were sick for a little while, but I don't think it was COVID related. I know my mother wasn't sick because of COVID. My sister, who works for the state of New Hampshire at the Veterans Home, she had an issue with them not testing her originally because she had fallen sick and they wanted her to return. And I think she did end up getting tested, but we're all here and we're all doing as well as we can be. So it's a day at a time, and healthy so far.
Happy to hear it. So, what's up with your shirt? Tell us about the shirt for our audio listeners. You have a pretty interesting story here with the shirt. If you got to go back and take a look at the video.
The shirt is, I did this originally as a design on Cotton Bureau. And the money went to two charities for that. It was Girls Who Code, Black Girls Code. This time around, it's still up on the website, and I can give you the links for that afterwards. There was a high demand for different sizes and colors that weren't available the first time around. And I actually got in touch with some people at Cotton Bureau to give it another run after the original run had ended. And it's sold like, I was very surprised at the amount that was sold. I believe it was 50 or 60 shirts that were sold in that run. So this time around, I want to take the money, the proceeds from sales, and donate that or give to Black Lives Matter.
That's excellent. What was your experience? I know you had some kind of we were talking last week, or maybe it was this weekend, about you had an experience with the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you mind going into that?
I went to a protest in Portland, Maine, and I was there doing what I can to show my support. I am taking a really, really hard look at what I didn't understand before as my whiteness, and how being a white male has benefited me throughout my entire life. Just not just my career in tech, how it's benefited me in ways in and out of tech. It gave me a good look at what my friends are feeling, and the landscape of what's going on as far as we need to dismantle a system that's very, very suppressive against Black people, in my opinion. Now, I'm not the guy that go into really, great length and detail about it, but from what I've been learning about the system, learning about the movement, I need to look at how my whiteness has benefited me. And that's what I've been doing for the past couple weeks, is reading a lot and listening.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people don't have any real perspective of how their, as you put it, whiteness affects everyone else. If you're quiet about things, if you don't speak up, if you're complacent, if you just let things go, it's amazing how everyone now is getting together, and I think we have a really good chance to change the world with this.
I hope so. I really, really do. I see a lot of people on Twitter especially that are angry, that are hurting, and it's understandable, though I don't fully understand it. I will never fully understand it, because how other people are feeling, because I'm not a Black man. I am a white male that has gone through life unscathed. And I was thinking the other day as I drove by a state trooper that, how many times have I, have driven by a police officer, going well over the speed limit, for instance, and not getting pulled over, or, running red lights and little stuff like that, which has caused me to reflect on how I have benefited from an unequal system.
Yeah, and it's interesting too how the administration, this president specifically, is the personification of, at least in my opinion, my personal opinion, of evil, honestly, and the reflection of everything that's been going on as far as providing a lot of these evil forces to exist and flourish under his administration. I mean, you saw just the racist and crimes just when his first 2 weeks of being elected just went sky high. It's yeah. I mean, he pretty much endorses the KKK. This guy needs to go.
Yeah.
And I don't see how anyone at this point is, I mean, it's going to really illustrate in November if this guy even loses by a little bit. You know what I mean? If he loses by 40%, I'm still going to be disappointed. He needs to lose by 100%.
Yeah. Well, I agree. We all know that he won't, unfortunately, lose by 100%. But with that said, what I see is it mirrors there are a lot of similarities between him and another infamous historical figure who I don't think I have to name, in mannerisms and the way he acts and just the loose cannon, I guess, for the lack of a better word, mentality that he has. I really, really wish that Jack Dorsey would take away his Twitter. That is probably the first step to drowning out a lot of the lies and the fear mongering. And people say tech is not political. Well, I'm sorry, but it is. That's just the way it is. Tech is political, whether you want to hear it or not. And I can tell you it's political because from day one, when I started 20 some odd years ago, it's political. There's no way, around it. Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey have made it political, and other, Silicon Valley has made it political. So when I see people say, leave politics out of tech, well, it's deeply rooted in tech is deeply rooted in politics and vice versa. So you see the politics in tech all the time with white male domination.
I think it's funny you say that because I've had conversations with some people. There's this outward impression because I work remote. I live in Florida, rural Florida, but I work for Silicon Valley companies. And my experience has been that, just as you said, tech companies are very political, and they tend to fall onto the conservative side of political. The undertones, the way that they are run, the things that they support, maybe not publicly, but the things that they support with their money. And it's interesting because I've had these conversations with people and they're like, oh, they see these companies as kind of these liberal, like if any politics they stand for, it's liberal, right? They, oh, but look at Google, you know, do no harm, or don't be evil, and all of this stuff. And I'm like, that is not at all how these companies are. When you are in this company, when you're working for this company, the things that you see, the things that you hear, things that you experience, I mean, they're so conservative. And the bottom line is, how much money can we make? And how much can we make for the people at the top? And it's frightening. It's really frightening. Sorry,
Yeah,
just like, I was just remembering this conversation where there, you know, there's this false kind of sense that they're all about, you know, empowering people, and they're not. They're about empowering themselves and other corporations.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, you can have all the amenities that you want. You know, you can have a playground and a coffee bar and a bar and a masseuse, you know, 2 doors down from your office, and have this campus of, you know, it's like a big giant playground for your workers. But the product you put out and the head of your company, whether it's, you know, a CEO or, you know, whatever title, highly reflect on that. And what we've seen in the past few years with Facebook and Twitter, and Amazon and Google, and I mean, the list goes on and on, it's not, it's political to the point where, you know, you have these companies, they're, as far as I know, supporting the people they want to support. So that means tech is political. There's no way around it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's also interesting too how you brought up the point. It's a boys' club. It's white men, and I think I saw a tweet just a few hours ago too. How who is it? Is Femke? Everybody, I'm sure, knows Femke. She was had a tweet that was talking about how she sees so many people in her age group with the same experience as in her role as managers, but she sees a lot of males having that privilege, getting to be managers, but not a lot of females. So, you know, it's a weird thing with tech and some of these companies, right?
Very. And I've never worked for a Silicon Valley company, and I am not the type that would probably fit into a typical Silicon Valley company, just for the fact that I am a little on the defiant side. So I have, over the years, I have tried to develop a code of ethics that I can put forth in my work so that I can live with myself after the workday is over and say, you know, I did my work. I didn't do it for evil. I did it for good. You know, I created something that I can be proud of. And I go by those rules, and I try to be better than I was yesterday is basically my number one motto, and just try to do good.
Well, speaking about what, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sarah, please.
Frederick. All right. We're always interrupting each other. It's like our thing. But I think we were going to say the same thing. I got to be honest, I don't know a lot about your background and what you've done. So I'd love to hear more about your career, how you got into tech, and what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of your viewers don't know who I am. So I started way back in, it was third or fourth grade, where I saw a Commodore PET 2001. Now that's going, I'm dating myself here. And if you cut my leg off, you could probably carbon date me and count the rings. But it was third or fourth grade, and I just remember seeing whatever it was on the screen and saying, wow, you know, how does that work? And then we moved from my parents, my family, my parents and my sister and I moved from Portland, Maine to rural New Hampshire. And that was in the middle of my 5th grade year. And I remember walking into the new school, and they had a math room that had 2 or 3 Commodore PET computers. One had the original Oregon Trail running on it. And I said, I want to make something like that. I remember just looking at it and being fascinated by it.
That was the game.
That was the game. It was, and I was never good at it. I was never any good at it. But
Was anybody? It was really difficult.
I think everybody died of dysentery at least 6 times.
Oh my God, yeah.
But yeah, I remember just, they had math games and they had spelling games. They had all these games on cartridges, and the cartridges went into the computer themselves. And I was just fascinated by the computer. So when my family got around to buying a Commodore 64, and I know I hear it all the time when I, you know, watch or listen to the podcast, where almost everybody's had a Commodore 64 in their life. And we had one. And I remember going through the instruction manual and doing everything in the instruction manual in like 2 or 3 days. And that's how I learned BASIC. And from there, we went to, as time progressed, and I actually made those old Choose Your Own Adventure books. I ended up making those into BASIC games, putting them on 5 1/4-inch floppies and selling them to people for like $20 a pop.
Nice.
So that's how I got into programming. You know, as like I said, as time progressed, you know, and computers evolved, we got the IBM desktop computer. That's how I learned HTML and CSS using Mosaic, Netscape Navigator, and Internet Explorer 3, maybe 3 or 4, one of the two. And my first books were Sam's Learn HTML XHTML in 21 days, which I blew through in like, I don't know, it was a really thick book. It was like 2.5-inch thick book. I think I finished that in like a week or so. And then I saw the book that really changed it for me was, I was in a Walden Books in a mall, and I saw this orange book, and the bright colors usually catch my eye for whatever reason. So I picked it up, and there was a guy on the front. He was wearing a blue beanie. And I said, this is interesting, because it was from his top lip up. And I opened up and I read the first chapter in Walden Books. And I said, okay, I'm getting this book, because everything fell into place. Oh, this is how you make a website. And that was, of course, Designing with Web Standards by Jeffrey Zeldin. So I bought that. I read that. I looked at the examples in the book, and still have the book on my bookcase. too. And then just went from there. And, you know, I've never really settled for learning and sticking with one thing. It's always been, I have this curiosity with pretty much everything in web design and development.
Well, let me ask you, you consider yourself you're a front end developer, right? A senior front end developer. What does that entail for you? Like, what is your catalog of skills?
I have dabbled in Rails, Ruby, PHP mostly. Mostly over it was maybe 15 to 16 years of freelancing, working remotely from home. PHP and WordPress were my two main back-end skills. And with the front end, I had a focus on WordPress sites and web standards. And along the way, there was, of course, Perl and all those ancient languages. I even dabbled in Flash and ActionScript for a while. Now, I'm more out of the PHP arena and more into and of course, along the way, I should say, was JavaScript's been a constant through the whole thing. But now I have this fascination with static site generators, like the one I use for my site, 11ty. I love 11ty. You know, Jekyll was another static site generator I use, Middleman and Hugo and all these new technologies. Those are what fascinate me right now. And I have skills in other areas because working by myself mostly throughout my career, I've had to adapt to learning how to do user experience, for instance, or UI design. So it's kind of like a buffet of everything that I could learn. I've tried to learn as much as I can.
You also do a little bit of accessibility as well, right?
Yes. Lately, and by lately I mean in the past 5-6 years, I have focused on accessibility because I have seen friends and family that they have a hard time accessing websites or using an application. And 2019, I went to UX Burlington, and I was on the track. I was at Krista Marcin's talk for accessibility, and that just rekindled everything. After hearing him and meeting him in Burlington, that rekindled all the stuff that I had learned up until that point for progressing and learning new stuff and advocating more and educating myself more, as well as educating and advocating, educating clients and prospective clients, and advocating for people whose voices aren't heard. And when I saw that tweet that I sent you, Frederick, I wasn't surprised, because I've run into that same issue, and I don't have that in front of me, but
well, I have it here. I have it in the doc. So the tweet was, well, I'll get to the context of the tweet and then we'll dive into it. It was, and I'm going to read this. Today, my dad cried over the phone He wanted 1 week where he could use the computer without help. He's blind. Each inaccessible web page tells him, quote, "You aren't welcome in this world," unquote. If you don't know whether your website or app is accessible, it's not. Start learning. So that was the context of the tweet. Do you want to dive into that and explore that a little bit, Todd?
Yeah, I think we all have a duty as designers and developers to educate ourselves, to do the work and to make what we're working on accessible for everybody, because that's what accessibility is. That's accessibility is just not a checklist of things to check off and say, okay, I've got this list done. Now let's move on to the next thing. Accessibility is a web that is accessible for everybody, no matter what, you know, regardless of age, you know, gender, sex, you know, whether you like hamburgers or cheeseburgers, it shouldn't matter. Whether you got a 2G connection or a 5G connection, you know, whether you got dial-up or whether you have, you know, the fastest internet speeds available to man. Everybody in the UN also recognizes that accessibility is a basic human right. So when I see developers that shrug it off, or developers that say it's not a concern, that that really, really honestly aggravates me to no end, because, you know, if you're building the next greatest, say, social app for pictures, you're an Instagram rival, for instance, and you're not making it accessible, you're shutting out a lot of people. I know, and I've seen a couple of friends, their relatives have motor skill impairments, and using some websites are just, they can't. And seeing the frustration on their faces makes me double down and go on Twitter and get up on my soapbox and, you know, shout from the rooftops. You know, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We need to do a better job. We're breaking the web. I still, with the WebAIM million website report that just came out, it's gotten worse from the year prior. So, you know, whether you want to admit it, whether you want to, you know, do the work or not, developers and designers, I feel, need to be, I mean, you don't have to go and read the specs. You should have an understanding that we need to make things accessible for everybody and not shut people out, which is what basically is developers and designers are doing when they, you know, when they make things inaccessible.
What do you think it is? I'm curious what your thoughts on this, because I've had this battle many, many times with many different people at many places, and I've done front-end development, and now I mostly do user experience design. But what I often come up against is this idea that it is something you do. that's really hard and takes a long time, and then you check it off a list. And it always really confounds me, because really it's about understanding the basics and checking those off as you go. As you build a component, each component, make sure it's accessible. As you do each design, consider, one of the things that you have to think about is, did we consider every user? But
Color contrast.
well, I mean, it's way more than just color contrast. I think a lot of people tend to think, that's what they think of when they think of accessibility, but
I'm just throwing
yeah.
an example out.
Yeah. It just, so I guess I'm curious what you think is this big hang up that people have. What is stopping people from shifting their perception of it as this huge thing that takes forever to just a daily check? Like, yes, I've done this. Yes, I've considered this.
Ego.
Yeah.
There is a vast amount of ego in tech. I myself have had that ego, and I literally had somebody tell me years ago, it's not about you, it's about the user. And that same person also said, who was a great mentor for me, that same person told me, you're not making this for you. You're making this for other people. You're making this for the user. So I think it's ego mixed with in some cases it might just be to make a paycheck. In other cases, it may also be that they just don't know. That they just think it's like you said, a daunting task. It's not a daunting task. HTML by itself is very accessible.
Yeah.
HTML and CSS are probably two of the more accessible programming languages that I know. And yes, they are programming languages. And I know that's another battle. But as far as what I think, though, why, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I've upset a lot of people about this. And I've had a lot of people get defensive and say, that's just not, I care. And I said, well, if you really did care, you would advocate and educate more. Well, I don't want to lose the client. Well, I get it, especially these days where we have what's going on around us, and you can't afford to lose a client, for instance. I get that. But at the same time, I have literally said to potential clients, I want to set X amount of hours aside for accessibility and testing. They didn't want to put that in the budget. And so I said, I can't do this then. You'll have to find somebody else. A few of them have come back later on. I actually had a company contact me recently, about a month ago. And I did some consulting with them on how they can make their product and their website more accessible. So, and I sent them to the places that I feel could help them out, and the people that could help them out. It's basic, it's not just alt tags. It's not just color contrast. It's not just, running something through a checker and then just saying, okay, we're done. It's testing with people with disabilities. It's using one of many websites that I've seen. I mentioned a few on my website too, for color contrast and the different types of vision impairments that people have. You know, ratios and this, you know, ratios for text, small text, big text, ratios for components. So I think it's a mix of ego, grabbing that paycheck, and just fear of the unknown. And yeah, I found out through a long time of being stubborn myself that just because I'm offended, it doesn't mean I'm right. And usually when I get defensive, when I'm told something I don't want to hear, it's my subconscious saying, yeah, maybe you screwed up there, so maybe you should fix this. And I think that has a large part to do with it too. So you can bang out the best stuff on a, you know, in a JavaScript framework, but it doesn't mean it's the right choice or the best choice. And I'm not picking on JavaScript frameworks or JavaScript, but I believe there's a time and a place for that. For instance, my website used to be powered by WordPress. I used to have a lot of clients on WordPress sites. I got sick and tired of them getting hacked weekly, it seemed. So I just, that's when I made the move to static site generators. I think people need to open their eyes and look at the big picture and what we're doing because of, you know, like I mentioned before, the WebAIM report. And I mean, a large amount of the web right now is just sites that aren't even being used. And a good reference to learning more about that would be Jerry McGovern in his new book, Worldwide Waste. It's a phenomenal book, and I recommend people read it and follow him on Twitter.
Well, what are some resources besides the one you just mentioned for someone listening to this and going, you know, I guess I could do a little bit better, or I definitely need to do way better? Where do they go?
I would first, if you want to learn more, I would start doing testing on your own stuff, like, you know, your own personal site. Download and use the Wave accessibility checker. Firefox has accessibility tools built into the dev tools. I'm not a Chrome user, so I'm not, you know, real familiar with their tools, but I know that, you know, Lighthouse is in the Chrome dev tools. There's the Axe accessibility tools by DQ. I would tell somebody, you know, go to levelaccess.com and sign up for their webinars. Derek Featherstone has some great webinars with people in the industry about accessibility. And they have other webinars on other topics as well. DQ had a bunch of stuff during, it was maybe a couple of weeks ago for Global Accessibility Day. There are, I mean, if you search for, you know, accessibility, you know, you're going to find a ton of stuff. And, you know, I am more than happy to direct people in a direction and give them names, and, you know, follow the people in accessibility on Twitter if you're on Twitter. And there are so many of them out there. It would take me another episode to get through the list. But they're out there. Find them, follow them, and hear what they're saying. But start with your own stuff. You know, put your website through an accessibility check, and go from there. There's Slack groups. I belong to a couple Slack groups myself that are focused on accessibility, and, you know, learn that way.
One of the people we spoke with recently, because we touch a lot on this subject, was Krista Marcin, and you should definitely, if you don't know his work and about him, we'll put a link in the show notes, and he does a lot of talks about this very same subject. And when we had him on, as we discussed earlier, Todd, there was one moment where I didn't know about this media spin that they put on this thing with the McDonald's cup of coffee. And I was truly fascinated to learn, because I made a comment to Chris about this where, oh yeah, it's like somebody getting, you know, coffee spilled on them and then saying the coffee was hot. Of course the coffee was hot. Little did I know that that was actually a whole media spin thing, because that happened when I was a little kid. But what I didn't realize as I grew up was the true story that went into that, which was this woman had an actual authentic experience with this, and it was very serious and quite tragic and sad. Do you mind going into that a little bit, and the whole media spin of some of these things?
Yeah, it was 1992. I think I had just turned 21, and I remember, I remember, and I think I tweeted this to you when I had seen that Twitter thread about, you know, the whole topic. Yeah. And I said, I remember like it was yesterday. And yeah. I don't know why, but it's one of those things that has stuck with me. And the woman, Stella Liebeck was her name, lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was with her grandson in a McDonald's parking lot and was taking the lid off a cup of McDonald's coffee. Well, she had spilled that coffee in her lap, and it ended up causing third-degree burns on her legs and her inner thighs, in her thigh area. Come to find out, coffee, I believe, from when I worked in restaurants, was 150 to 160. You're supposed to serve coffee at. McDonald's coffee was 180 to 190. That in itself is bad enough. And I remember saying, well, how hot could it have been? You know, we tend to, you know, think of hot coffee as, oh, I burnt my lips on my tongue on it, so it can't be that hot. Well, you know, if anybody has looked into it and done the, you know, a little research on it, the photos of her in the hospital are pretty grisly. I mean, there were skin grafts, and it was, like you said, a lot of damage. So the media, what started out as a 600, I believe, word article in the Albuquerque paper, AP and Reuters picked it up. That turned into a 400 word article And then when it went worldwide, which it did real fast, it went from 400 words down to sometimes even 50 words in a newspaper. So that's like, you know, that's like me saying, "Hey Sarah, you know, the guy across the street, he was using his saw and he cut his hand off." And then that, Sarah, you go to Frederick and you say, you know, Todd told me this guy was, you know, across the street, he was using his saw and he chopped his hand off, and he went over and he chopped his neighbor's hand off, or something like that. You know, it was just a major spin by the media, who dragged this poor woman for miles. I mean, this went international in no time. And not only that, it's been a pop culture reference for years, and it's still, you know, I still see remnants of that. It was mentioned in Futurama, Seinfeld. There was a country song. I don't listen to country music, so I don't know. I don't know who it was, or, you know, but I remember there was a country song that was mentioned in late night talk shows. I remember vividly Jay Leno, not a big fan, just hammering away with his jokes. And you know, there was political cartoons, you know, and the HBO film Hot Coffee really does a good job in putting it out there and telling the real story of what happened. Just because a woman burned herself, she only wanted money. She only wanted McDonald's to cover the medical expenses, which were $20,000 at the time. They were willing to give her $800. They were willing to settle for $800. Back then, their slogan was, "You deserve a break today." I don't see much of a break there, but I think punitive damages were, and I'm no lawyer, I'm no attorney, I'm not, legal expertise is nil. So punitive damages, however, she was right around $2.7 million she was awarded originally. The judge knocked that down to $600,000. McDonald's, I believe, appealed. They knocked that below $500,000. And there were, you know, there was 2 years of physical therapy for her, and just, you know, every time it was brought up in pop culture or on the news, the family had to go through the same stuff all the time and relive this. It wasn't McDonald's first foray into legal problems either. I mean, there's plenty of problems they've had. And that year, I think, where I read, there were 700 cases of hot coffee being spilled on a customer. Back then, they never had the warning label on the cup or the lid that said, you know, "Caution hot," like we see now. This was the impetus for that. This was the case that I believe propelled all that, you know, the warning labels and everything on hot beverages. And it was, I remember thinking when I first originally heard it, she hit the lottery. And I think a lot of people thought that as well. And she didn't hit the lottery, you know. I mean, back then, just a shade under $500,000 was a lot of money, but she didn't hit the lottery, you know. She went through a traumatic incident, and big corporation, again, looking out for themselves and not their customers.
Yeah, it's amazing how, how you talked about, like, even citing Jay Leno, how things like that totally distort reality, all for this corporate greed, and not getting to the true story and how that got distorted over time. It's it's crazy. Todd, unfortunately, we're getting pretty short on time. We're almost at the end of the show, and I think we're just gonna have to have you back on to do another one of these to get some more out. We had like 100 other things to talk about, but since we're right at the end, there's two questions that we like to ask the guests at the end. First thing is, how can people find out more about you? What's your Twitter handle, and what's your website address for our audio listeners?
You can find me on Twitter at my name, Todd Libby, TODDLIBBY. My website is toddl.dev. I right now am writing a couple of other articles that I'm going to post. I'm just getting back into some work after taking a little bit of time off last week. I have a Twitch channel that I'm not really good at going on and streaming, but I do that as well from time to time. It's twitch.tv /Todd Libby. And, feel free to follow me if anybody has any questions, wants to chat. My DMs are open, even for the hecklers. Yeah, those are the main places you can find me at.
Excellent. And Todd, last question is, any final words for the audience? Any kind of words of wisdom here at the end?
Yeah. Be good to each other. Open your mind and be inclusive. And I know we hear it, we see it all the time on Twitter, but Black lives do matter. Black disabled lives matter. Trans women are women, trans men are men. Let's be inclusive. There's so much going on right now that we need to fix, and it's going to take a group effort to fix, not exclusive groups, mind you, inclusive, everybody. So, just be good to each other.
Well said. Sarah, do you have anything?
No, we got to do this again. That was really fascinating. Thank you. I really enjoyed chatting with you today.
Yes, thank you. And it was my pleasure, definitely. And I'm up for another one if you are. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Todd. And thanks everybody for listening. Thank you so much. We'll see you again really soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.